Welcome back to the Wolff Den, presented by Win Again Academy. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we welcome Tim McGhee to the Wolff Den. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Matt, thanks. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on here. And we're going to talk a lot about sports and your background and what you're doing now. But I want to tell everybody how we met. It was on LinkedIn, and it was regarding your Nice Guy, Nice Gal program that you do every week. So tell everybody kind of who you are and what you're doing for those that don't know.
Sure. So I am the founder and principal of a very small agency called MSP Sports. And we consult to brands, sports properties, startups in the sports space, everything to do with partnerships, sponsorships, experiential marketing, content marketing, celebrity and influencer marketing. So I spent most of my career on the agency side, both big and small agencies. But I also did a stint on the brand side where I ran sponsorships for Singular Wireless, and later, after they were acquired by AT&T, I was and our groups were merged. I was fortunate enough to be promoted and elevated to running global sponsorships for AT&T. After I left AT&T, I went back to what was then called IMG Consulting, now part of WME Endeavor, and ran sponsorship consulting for the Americas. But I've been on my own for the last 9 years plus at this point.
And tell everyone about the Nice Gal, Nice Guy, Nice Gal feature that you do on LinkedIn.
Yeah, thanks for recognizing that. And I appreciate all the nominations you've given and the shout outs you've given since we started that. About 2 years ago, I came up with the idea of recognizing people just for being nice. In the sports business, the accolades tend to go to the people who win awards or get promoted or win championships. And I wanted to do something simply to recognize people for being nice, because unfortunately, it's not as common as we would hope. So every week, on Monday, I open up nominations for that week, and anybody who's interested in nominating somebody for just being a nice person, a guy or a woman, is welcome to send me a direct message on LinkedIn. And then every Friday morning, I just try to give a shout out to the people who've been nominated that week. And so for me, I really enjoy being the messenger. I think it spreads positivity. And it's a nice way for me to say thank you to some of the people in my life who I just believe are really good people.
Yeah, so I nominated a bunch of people because I think there's a lot of people who are doing some great things. And I'm pretty sure I modeled my team player of the week after yours. I don't actually get any nominations. I don't do it every week. It's kind of been more like I have to choose someone and then create it. And which is it's disappointing. And I wrote that the other day so someone wrote, either you wrote that or someone commented, and I was like, how is it that something that is free and just say, hey, take 30 seconds to send Tim a message to help recognize people doesn't get as much. I mean, you should be to the point where you say, look, all right, I have enough, for a month. That's it. And we'll pick it back up in a month. But I don't see as many. You see some of the same people, which is good. People should get recognized as much as they can. I think this is the type of recognition that really is meaningful, because it's, hey, I'm recognizing what you did, not, look, this person's, 40 under 40 for the Forbes or, one of those things that is very political in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'd like to, I'd like to think that people are getting back to work in a real meaningful way, and they're too busy to nominate somebody, for my little rinky-dink weekly awards. But when I get those nominations, I gladly give those people a shout out. And I'll keep doing it as long as there's an interest. But, there's never going to be a shortage of nice people. Whether or not this sort of runs its course, we'll see. But as long as I get nominations, I'll keep on recognizing people.
Yeah, and hopefully get a lot more people getting recognized, because there's a lot of people behind the scenes who are doing a lot of good. I've recognized these people who are out there sharing job descriptions like all day, like ridiculous amounts. And I share them, I'll like them and comment it to get some visibility, and I do my open to work thing. But I mean, it's a very time consuming thing to put that type of content out on LinkedIn, and they're not getting anything for it other than to help other people, which is really, the definition of selfless.
Yeah, those people I admire so much. They are the epitome of paying it forward, and I'm a big believer in paying it forward. But those people who are out there posting jobs and helping people in their job search, they're doing great work, and I mean, you can't say enough good things about those people.
Yeah, and while there are getting back to work, there's still so many people out there looking, and so we'll continue to help that as much as we can. I'm a sports guy, I'm a memorabilia guy, and I'm looking at your back wall here. So let's talk a little bit about the wall. What do you have on there? I see some baseballs, obviously a Masters flag, an actual flag from the Masters.
So this is I because of the proliferation of Zoom and StreamYard calls and videos and things like that, I've taken to sort of mixing this up a little bit. So over my left shoulder, when I was with AT&T, I led the group that did a deal with the New York Yankees for AT&T to be an official sponsor, and as a result, I was invited to go to spring training, and it was like a dream come true for the 12-year-old Tim McGhee. I got to see some of the players that I watched growing up, and I became a fanboy. I took off my sponsorship marketer hat for a few days and put on my fan hat. And so those are signed by a bunch of guys from those late 1970s teams, guys like Reggie Jackson and Goose Gossage and Oscar Gamble, Mickey Rivers, people like that. Over my this shoulder, my right shoulder. Sorry. When I was a small child, my father was a New York City police detective whose precinct covered Shea Stadium. So the first team I started rooting for as a kid was the New York Mets. So that's got some Mets signatures on it. Why am I having so much trouble left and right?
I always do.
Yeah. The Masters flag was a gift from a former colleague at AT&T, signed by Jordan Spieth after he won his green jacket, because he knows that I'm a big collector, and so he was kind enough to give me that. And then the hats are a shout out. I was on a call last week with a good friend of mine, Tom Glick, who was president of Tepper Sports and Entertainment. So we were having some preliminary conversations about a client I have who is interested in exploring partnerships with the club. So I wanted to suck up to Tom a little bit. So I've got a Panthers hat, and right behind me is a Manchester City hat where Tom used to work as a senior executive of Man City before he came back to the States with Tepper and the Carolina Panthers. So I try to mix it up when I'm having different things.
Yeah, and the name tag. Did you run a race?
No, that again, I was so fortunate to be invited to do cool things. That was from playing a round of golf with the PGA Tour at TPC Sawgrass. Oh. And there was a poor guy who was forced to caddy for me for the entire day, and he had to wear my name on his back. And I don't think he could have torn that off his caddy overalls fast enough at the end of the round. No, he was a very nice guy, and he was kind enough to give that to me, and so I put that up there.
That's pretty cool. Always going to be a tough question here. If you had to get rid of everything but one thing, what do you keep?
Okay. Well, that is actually easy. So I have a son who is now 19 who is on the spectrum for autism.
Okay.
And when he was about 9 years old, I had a friend who worked at the Islanders, a long-time sports business executive by the name of Justin Johnson. And Justin said, "Hey, we're having Autism Awareness Night. Would Tom like to come out and and dropped the ceremonial first puck with Darryl Strawberry, who had given who has spent a lot of his post-playing career raising awareness and research funds for autism. And I said, well, I don't know if Tom wants to, but I know I want him to. So Tom went out on the ice with Darryl Strawberry, who couldn't have been nicer. As you can imagine, at the Nassau Coliseum, the crowd just exploded for Darryl Strawberry. And as they were walking off the ice, they gave Darryl Strawberry a standing ovation. And my son said, was that for me? And I said, yeah, Tom, it was for you. And I have a picture of my son, who's now 19, but was then about 9, standing with Darryl Strawberry, that Darryl Strawberry was kind enough to autograph to my son, and one for me. And the funny thing is, now Tom's 19 years old. He's a freshman in college, and he's probably almost as tall as Darryl Strawberry. But that's the one thing I would keep.
Do you have a puck from that day, or?
We do. My son, still in his room, has the ceremonial puck, and it was signed by Doug Waite, who was actually the captain of the Islanders.
Yeah. That's that's. Ooh.
Yeah, best sports experience in my life.
I mean, imagine for him too. You're 9 years old, and it's like, how you gonna top that? But
it was. Yeah, the only tough thing was he has a twin sister, and she was a little bit jealous that night, but she got over it.
And she's not on the spectrum.
No.
Are they in college together? I have a twin brother. I actually followed my brother a year later to college because I went to community school. Are they in college together?
Separate schools. So.
Is that the first time they've been away?
Yeah, pretty much. And somehow they both stayed COVID free and made it through their respective first years at school. So
that's great. Yeah, I'm a twin brother, and we kind of were. I mean, we never were separated until I went to basketball camp for a couple of weeks. When I was maybe 16, and then he went away to school, and I stayed at community college. But I followed him a year later. So. Mm-hmm. Twins is it's a special bond. I don't know if it's probably a little bit tighter if you're male or female, but because there's just that's the way it's with brothers and sisters. But I gotta imagine that they're as they grow older, their bond will get even stronger, which is great.
Yeah, I think they're starting to appreciate each other more now that they've been apart.
Yeah, I think with my sister, who's 3 years older, I mean, we didn't really appreciate each other until we go away to college, and you don't see them for 3 years.
Yeah,
mostly, and now we're as close as ever. So, someone else was saying that their twins are like fighting all the time. I'm like, that's okay. They're young. They're gonna fight, and then they're gonna grow up, and then they'll still fight a little bit, and they'll get closer. So,
yeah, no, you're exactly right.
Yeah, that's a great story. I got picked to do name that tune at halftime of a Gator game, and that was fun for me. And I was supposed to do a hot shot tournament. I was in the finals, and it was supposed to be during a Nets game, but we were going away on family vacation, so I had to miss that. That was was going to be my superstar moment. But some really neat stuff you got back there, and obviously, being a part of the sports industry and the sponsorships is certainly a good way to accumulate that. Let's talk about the background. How did you get into the sponsorship world and the sports world?
So when I went after college, like many people of my generation, I went to work on Wall Street. And after a while, I thought people who said they loved their job were either lying or crazy, because I just did not enjoy what I was doing. And so I went back to business school. I quit and I went back to business school full time. And I finished my requirements. I got a concentration in finance, just sort of to have something to fall back on should the sports industry not work. And I spent my entire second year really writing a business plan for an event company. And I came out of school during a recession. I couldn't get the funding necessary to get it launched. So I took a job in management consulting because I had a mentor in business school who said the skills that you learn in management consulting are ones that you'll be able to apply no matter what you do for the rest of your career. And it's probably the single best piece of career advice I ever got. So I did that for for 2 years, and on nights and weekends and holidays, I worked on getting this event marketing company going. And so I launched it, and it was successful by every measure but one financially. But I learned a tremendous amount. I had some fun clients and some fun projects. And through that, I met a guy by the name of Dill Driscoll, who is a true visionary in the experiential marketing space. He is the founder of Momentum, which is now one of the biggest agencies in the world, and most successful. And Dill brought me in. He met me through one of the events that I was running, and brought me in to Momentum to work on the experiential side. It wasn't even called experiential at that point. It was called event marketing. And it just so happened that they had an opening on the corporate consulting space and side, and they said, "Well, would you want to step in and work on the corporate consulting side?" And I had no idea what corporate consulting was as it related to sports marketing.
You ever see the movie Hitch?
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite lines in all the movie scenes, and I love to talk about it when they're at the dinner with her boss, and he's like, "So what do you do?" And he's like, "Consulting." He's like, "A little bit of marketing." He's like, "I have no idea what that is." He goes, "Nobody does. That's why we get to charge so much."
Well, I knew what management consulting was from my 2-year stint doing that after business school, but I didn't know what it meant as it related to sports marketing. And so they put me on the Lucent Technologies account. And back then, this is going back 20 plus years ago, Lucent Technologies had recently spun off from AT&T and had kept all of the sponsorships that AT&T had at that point, the PGA Tour, the NBA, Major League Soccer at its launch. And we were in charge of helping them develop and activate their sponsorship strategy. And I thought it was just a lot of fun to use your brains, as opposed to just being the guy who was out there hanging banners all the time. And so I've done that for most of the past 20 plus years. I did a short stint at what was then SFX, their experiential marketing agency running client services. But for the most part, I've been advising and consulting in the sponsorship and experiential space ever since.
So describe it for those who are listening and don't know what it is.
So in corporate consulting, and that's what we call that at IMG, it's also called sponsorship consulting, brand consulting. You're working, in this case, what I did was I worked with brands to help them determine the best way to utilize sports, entertainment, and other lifestyle passions to achieve marketing, business, sales objectives. And so everything from the 20,000-foot strategic view of where they should be focusing their attentions down to the very granular, how should we be activating on site with the tickets and hospitality that we got as part of our sponsorship deal, and everywhere in between, including things like identifying, evaluating, and negotiating sponsorship agreements, to developing measurement tools to help them determine whether or not they're achieving the objectives they've set out and whether or not they're getting a reasonable return on their investment. So the one thing I really liked about it is it allowed me to go from the very strategic on one end of the spectrum to the very tactical on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah. I wrote an article discussing partnership versus sponsorship. It's kind of a highly debated thing. I'm looking for partnerships where I believe two entities are pulling their resources together to offer something and sharing the revenue. A lot of people are using the term partnership when they really mean sponsorship. And my belief is they do that because it's kind of sponsorship has like a sales connotation, like like paid advertising type thing. What's your feeling on that?
No, I agree with you. I used to kid some of the properties that we would sponsor and say, listen, until I see the checks coming back my way and not just going from us to you, we're not going to call it a partnership, right? Because the term partnership implies shared risk, shared reward, shared sacrifice, shared opportunities, shared challenges. Now, having said that, I was being somewhat facetious. The, while I agree with you that there is a fundamental difference between a partnership and a sponsorship, you can act, the properties that you sponsor can be very collaborative with you and act in many ways as a partner would act, in terms of giving you the information that you need in order to measure your success, giving you flexibility in some of the assets that you use, giving flexibility in terms of, being able to entertain key stakeholders that may go beyond what was actually in the sponsorship agreement. So there are aspects of partnerships with good properties, but there is a distinction between the two. I most certainly agree about that.
Yeah, and I also, one other thing that I talk about often is immeasurable data. And I think a lot of people, they don't talk about it because it can't be measured. You can't put a number on it, which means you can't put a dollar sign on it. But there's a lot of value to be offered in the advertising world or sponsorship world or experiential marketing world that is not, that can't be measured. And there's some data that's measured that's, it's funny math, like magazine subscriptions, right? I mean, hey, we have 2 million subscribers. Well, you send out 2 million magazines, but you don't have 2 million subscribers. I have like 8 magazines get sent to my house every week that I never even signed up for, right? And so, I think sometimes you got to look beyond the numbers. How do you have that conversation? Is that something you do? How do you have that conversation with these the people you're consulting?
Well, the first thing I ask every new engagement is, what does success look like for you at the end of this? And then you can start to determine what are the key things to measure, because there are fewer and fewer things that can't be measured, but there's a difference between being able to measure it and being able to put a dollar figure on it too. So, and I think that distinction needs to be made, which is why you see some sponsors now looking at not just the return on the investment, meaning what is the dollar value of what we get out of this sponsorship, but what is our return on our objectives, right? There are clients that are sophisticated enough to say, I want to increase my brand awareness by 15 percentage points over the term of this agreement, right? And that's something that can be easily measured, right? You do a baseline research study that determines what is the brand awareness of brand X, and then you, either through an ongoing tracking study or some discrete surveys later on during the course of that sponsorship, field the same research questions to the same type of audience. You can see if you've got a bounce in brand awareness. Now, so that's measurable, right? But is it monetizable? Number one, you don't know if all of that increase in brand awareness can be attributed to the sponsorship, right? Because ostensibly there's other things going on in the marketplace at the same time, and how do you separate them out? The other thing is that sometimes it's difficult to take an increase in brand awareness and then move it down the funnel and determine what does that result in incremental sales. Some companies just aren't sophisticated enough to do it. Some companies don't see they'll spend $10 to figure out they made 8, right? So they don't do it from a cost benefit perspective. So you want to measure as much as you can. You want to monetize that which can be easily monetizable. But when you measure it, you want to measure it against those pre-established benchmarks or objectives that you've set. Otherwise, you're just sitting there with data that you're like, okay, great. What does that tell me?
Yeah, I mean, I was just messaging with someone. We were on a weekly call that we have, and talking about how a lot of the data that people have, isn't correct. It's not accurate data. They have bad data. And then the other thing is that the data that they do have, they're not using it right. They don't know what to do with it. And so that's why I keep talking about the immeasurable data. If I say, hey, look, I got this ticket time machine thing from Sticker Mule. I love Sticker Mule. I don't know who's listening right now, but there's people who are going to go, you know what, maybe I'll get a sticker mule thing. And sometimes people ask, hey, how'd you hear of us? And you'll write it, but the majority of people won't. So they might get 10, 15 sales from this conversation and have no idea where that came from, might be doing some other advertising or thing at this time and just think, oh, wow, we had a bump in sales this week and we had this kind of promotion. So that's just sort of the stuff that I like to talk about. And again, it's tough. These are tough conversations because it's hard to talk about things if you can't talk about how to monetize it.
Yeah, well, so two things I would say. Number one, data is ubiquitous, right? You can always capture data. Where it becomes important is when you can glean insights from that data, and that's where analytics come in, right? You're analyzing the data as opposed to just raw numbers. That's what I would say, number one. Number two, I had a client several years ago that will go unnamed. It was a professional services company that had a very, it had a high seven-figure per year endorsement deal with a tour golfer. And when I started working with them, they said, well, every time our player is in contention, we see huge spike in our website traffic. And I said, okay, well, you're a professional services company, right? Your clients are the Fortune 1000 CIOs, CTOs, CFOs, and maybe CEOs, right? So your addressable base of people that you want to speak to is 5,000 people, for argument's sake. Don't you think that every one of those 5,000 people know who you are already, right? They're not the people who are going to the website on Sunday when your player on whose shirt your logo resides is winning. The people are going or saying, what does this company do? Right. So we had to completely reconfigure how they measured the success of that sponsorship. It wasn't just about the brand exposure that they got on the course of the weekend when their player was in contention, which obviously has value. But you have to look at other things in order to determine success.
Yeah. And some people, in the golf world or even other places, they have value for who they are. And it doesn't matter if they're on the top of the leaderboard or if they're just about to miss the cut, because they're going to be talked about and shown and highlighted.
Yep. No, exactly.
It's tough. It's always interesting to me, like the naming rights type thing, because it goes to, along with the lines of what you just said, like everyone knows, BB&T or AT&T Stadium. They know it, who you are. So what's the value in that? But they're paying hundreds of millions of dollars and they're not doing it if they don't know that they're getting the ROI. So there's, value to that for them. Not that people don't know who they are, but there's value to having that, their name on that property.
Yeah, and a company like AT&T, and we knew a little something about naming rights deals. We were on the building in San Antonio, we were on the ballpark in San Francisco, and then, ultimately, after a couple of years of being a cornerstone partner of the Dallas Cowboys, AT&T then took entitlement of the stadium, and certainly nobody needed to be reminded of who AT&T was. But when you looked at the way those the company's products and services were integrated into the everyday operations of the team's business, you can start to see the value of that. There's sort of, there's a certain catch-22 in naming rights deals, right? The brands that would most value, most benefit from the value of being on the building's name, right? Because they don't have any brand awareness, are the companies that are least able, in most cases, to afford the naming rights sponsorships. So that's why you get the AT&Ts of the world, the Verizon Centers, the City Fields of the world, because they can afford to do that. But it goes way beyond just the branding on the building.
Yeah, but the Marlins just have a new name for their park. I never heard of them before. There's an amphitheater down here that's changed names a bunch of times. They're now I Think Financial. I've never heard of I Think before, and I'm right in that area. I live in them. I've driven around. Actually, it's funny. I just actually saw the first, I think, site, and I've probably seen it before, but I never noticed it because I didn't know what I think was. It didn't register to me. Now they're on the amphitheater, and it stands out. Unless they're maybe new, that might be it. What makes AT&T a good partner for these teams and venues as opposed to, say, Verizon? Is it, hey, I want to get a telecommunications partner and I want to target these people, or sometimes it's just, look, these are the ones who's available and willing? Is that part of it? How much is it?
Well, listen, I will preface everything I'm going to say now by saying I haven't worked at AT&T for many years now.
I was meaning,
but in general, sometimes it comes down to what's available.
it could be Coke or Pepsi. It could be Frito-Lay's, or
I think in certain categories, right? There's always going to be somebody who's sort of lined up behind the incumbent. Should the incumbent not renew, or should the property and the incumbent not be able to come to an agreement on a renewal deal? But you're seeing more and more in categories where a company that might have in the past stepped up immediately will no longer do that, right? Their strategy has changed. They see other ways to engage their customers or other audiences they're seeking to reach. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult for the for the property to replace a sponsor that may not renew for whatever reason, right? I know that, again, I do know enough about AT&T. What they're doing now is they've walked away from many of the partnerships that they had for many years, and they've taken much more of a less is more approach. They've gone away from traditional sports into a much bigger presence in gaming and esports.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, coming out of the pandemic, what airlines do, right? Airlines were hit tremendously during the pandemic. As they come out of that, do they seek to gain a share of voice by spending on sponsorships, or do they keep their powder dry until their load factors get to the point where they can start to spend money on sponsorships again? Again, that's a company by company decision, I imagine, but there's certain industries that are going to be slow to return to sponsorships. The nice thing about sponsorships, though, is there's always new categories that are emerging that will take that inventory that a more traditional sponsor may have had in the past.
Yeah. And we're hoping to capitalize on that with Ticket Time Machine. I think we have excellent assets and real estate for sponsors where we can, bridge the digital with the physical. We're working on augmented reality experiences, gamification. So it'll be perfect for your experiential marketing and activations. I think, let's talk about print versus digital in the advertising and sponsorship world, but even in the collectible world, there's a shift in digital. And, I don't even know that it's just an age thing. Obviously us, those of us who are older are used to having it. Some people don't know what they've missed, right? Like, with the rotary phone or, all those funny things that you're like, well, what was that? And they didn't miss it. But, collectibles, memories, all that, everything that people are doing, whether it's physical or digital, is all for memories and to kind of, I don't know, show off maybe, or to have conversation pieces. What's your feelings on the physical and the digital? Obviously, you're a fan of the physical, just looking what's beyond you. Can you imagine a digital experience that would give you the same feeling and value of some of the stuff that's on your wall?
Personally, no, but I've always had a sign up in my office that says you are not the target audience. Right. So I always want to keep that in mind. I was just on a call earlier today with a company I've been working with in the NFT space, and a global sports property. Preliminary call about how this global sports property might use NFT for any number of things. What you've seen, so you've seen two things in the collectibles industry in particular over the last year. Number one, you've seen a huge spike in sales of traditional collectibles, right? Trading cards, autographed memorabilia, but trading cards in particular. At the same time, you've seen a move towards that digital product, right? Panini was the first one out with blockchain technology for digital collectibles, but before they even had the moniker of NFTs. Topps recently came out with an NFT product. And so I think what they're showing is that the physical and the digital can coexist, right? And you'll see that. But what you're seeing now in the NFT space is a couple things. One, it's a bit of the wild, wild west, right? Everybody is looking to get on board with the NFT craze. But what you're seeing is that the amount of energy that's expended to put something on the blockchain on some of the older, I use that term, relatively generation blockchains, makes the carbon footprint enormous, which is going to turn off a certain segment of the audience. It's also going to turn off a certain segment of it's going to turn off a certain segment of brands that might want to get involved with NFTs in particular.
I think the average
you also see
doesn't know that, though. The average person doesn't know about the carbon footprint.
Yeah, but it'll start to become more of a story, I believe. Yeah. And so the companies that do it more efficiently with less energy expenditure might have a point of differentiation, number one. The other thing is now you're seeing, like, if you look at NBA Top Shot, which I think is, it's a phenomenal product, but a lot of those things are only available to, what I heard for the first time today, the term crypto whales, right? These are people who have made tremendous amount of money in cryptocurrency, and they're looking for a place to park it, and they do so in NFTs. Now, how do you make those NFTs available to the masses? That's when you'll start to see.
You don't, because the value goes down.
Well, listen, there's, when you look at trading cards, right, there's some products that are several $1,000s per box. And then you have entry-level products that are, still available to a kid on his allowance. And there's a market for those products and everything in between. I think you'll see the same thing with NFTs as well.
I think the trading card is still largely unaffordable for the average kid. Like, not when we would go buy packs all the time. I was just at a card show the other day, and I still think it's the card show. It's interesting, the cards and the NFTs. To me, the percentage of people who are in the game for investment versus collectible, to a true collectible, which is why I don't even know if they can be called collectibles anymore. Some of it is really skewed towards the investment. Like, I can make some money.
Well, but you're seeing a couple. Yeah, I'm sorry. I get very passionate about this subject because I've been a collector my whole life.
Yeah, me too.
I think you're seeing some air start coming out of the bubble. You see prices are starting to come down on eBay and some of the other platforms for sports cards. I don't think it will crash the way it crashed in the 90s during the so-called junk era, but I do think some prices will come down. But you look, like, for example, Topps has their opening day product, which is a base product, which is intended, at least on the surface, to be affordable to the average everyday collector, right? There are fewer so-called hits in the box in terms of game-used swatches of fabric embedded in the cards or autographed cards. So the price point is theoretically supposed to be lower. It's, if you get people who make a run on it, it could inflate those prices, but those prices are starting to come down, and you're starting to see more product available. But I think the pandemic created a very inflated level of demand, which we're starting to see starting to come back more towards pre-pandemic levels. Now, the average may be higher than it was pre-pandemic, but there's a little bit of steam coming out of that market.
I think you're losing the collector out there because, when that stuff comes down, I have a ton of cards and I was never worried about how much money they were worth. Some of it would be like, cool, yeah, man, this card goes off. But I have thousands and thousands of cards and it was just cool to collect and talk about, figure, hey, we're going to pass this down to our kids. And that's the part that I don't care for with this. And because the collector in me and the collector in you is thinking, hey, we don't really care what this means. We want to know how much is it worth. And now there's no rhyme or reason. I mean, I saw a Luka Doncic card worth like $1,700. The guy hasn't won anything yet. And I'm looking at a Shaquille O'Neal card worth 12. The guy's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to come on for a later episode. We could spend the whole time talking about the collectibles industry, but you're absolutely right. There has been a large portion of the prospective audience that's been priced out, at least for the time being, as true collectors. There is sometimes seemingly no rhyme or reason to why certain cards or certain products do well and others don't. But to go back to the beginning of your question, younger people, Gen Z in particular, they're digital natives. So to them, a digital only product might be appealing, right? To be able to show their friends on their phone, hey, check out this Mike Trout home run, or check out this Shohei Ohtani, strikeout home run combination from last night. Whereas you and I, we might want the card that depicts that play.
Yeah. We're going to have that. Ticket Time Machine is going to make sure of that. But where's Ohtani going to line up in the pantheon of baseball greats?
Well, listen, he missed. What was his rookie year was 2018, right? So we're only 4 years out, and last year was sort of a wash. If he keeps it up, and that's a big if, yeah, I mean, I think he's going to go down as one of the, taking almost the Bo Jackson two-sport, freak in a different direction, right? He's a two-position freak, which hasn't been seen, realistically since Babe Ruth, right?
Yeah,
110 plus years ago, 105 plus years ago.
Yeah, can he stay healthy when you're pitching? And that'll be the question for me. It was always curious to me about pitching because when you're in high school, you hit when you're a pitcher, and even in college, we at University of Florida, we had a guy. His name was Brad Wilkerson. Was an All-American player, great hitter, and a great pitcher. And he went to the league, played with the Expos, I think, when there wasn't Expos, and never pitched. Guy was he was a top level college pitcher, but never pitched. And it's weird that you don't see a little bit more of that. You see some pitchers who can hit, and maybe if they were in the lineup, they might be able to do okay, but not what he's doing, which is incredible.
You might see more of it now. If I recall correctly, I think that was part of the deal when Ohtani signed with the Angels, was that he was going to be given the opportunity to pitch. It was part of the contractual negotiations. You might see more of it because if you think about it, if you're a college pitcher, right, you were the best athlete, on your little league team. You were the best athlete on your high school team, and you're probably one of the top 2 or 3 athletes on your college team. And if Ohtani proves out that he can have longevity at both positions, it has serious implications for for how a manager manages the batting order.
Yeah, and for people who are pitching and hitting,
right?
Okay, you can do this. I saw something the other day. It was remarkable. I don't know that I'll ever see anything like it again. There's a high school kid in Rhode Island has pitched 4 consecutive no-hitters.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. How do you get 4? I mean, you're not playing against, people who can't play. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's, some kids are just, freaks when it comes to that type of thing. We have a guy in our town who you probably had heard of, Leiter, who pitched for many years in the major leagues, and his son Jack is now at Vanderbilt and was projected top 5. He had I think he got a tired arm a little bit earlier this spring, but
well, that's what's so impressive about it. Leiter was was unhittable. And then he got jacked up for like 2 starts, and now he's back. So to be able to have that run is, to me, incredible. Brent gives some breaking news here. Coach K calling it a career after next season, this upcoming season. Yeah.
Not surprising. I'm almost surprised he didn't quit after this year, but maybe he wanted to be able to look at Roy Williams and say, I lasted longer than you.
Yeah, it's I think it'll be interesting what happens after, Duke is Duke, and they'll have a big name follow him, probably someone who played there.
There's going to be so many unforeseen consequences of this new NIL thing in college sports. It'll be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. I think he meant to say John Shire, not John Sheeter, but I did not know that. But I guess that's the next coach. There you go. I have mixed feelings. I think athletes should be rewarded and have the ability to make money. It's a you're opening up a can of worms with that. But it will be interesting to see. They get a big, they get a lot of value. Everything's only worth what someone will pay for it. So you talk about a lot of value. I think athletes, and not all of them and not at all schools, but a lot of these bigger time athletes, they get a lot of value and I'm not talking about the educational, though that counts, value as a student athlete.
Listen, I think it's good that athletes are compensated for the value they bring to their athletic programs. I just think there's a lot of unforeseen consequences, right? If you're a coach, you go to your booster association and say, I need you guys to step up and pay, the 40 guys that are coming in as freshmen this year on my football team, as ambassadors for your restaurant, for your local car dealership, for whatever, whatever local business you have. And in some ways, you've taken what was done under the table, perhaps many times in the past, and brought it out into the light. But it's going to have implications for recruiting. It's going to have implications for one and done in basketball. It's going to have a ton of implications. I don't know if it's been addressed. It could have implications for Title IX. Oh, yeah. I just think, I've worked very closely with the NCAA for many years on corporate partnerships, and not surprisingly, they weren't as proactive as they might have been on this, and hopefully they now are starting to recognize that this horse is leaving the barn, and they're whether or not they can get out in front of it or whether or not they can manage it, only time will tell.
Well, that's going to be the problem, though, getting out of the stable without the saddle, right? Because they're going forward. We're moving forward. We haven't figured it out, but we're moving forward on it in Florida and California.
A lot of you see a lot of the big programs in the Power 5 conferences are now taking the proactive approach of making services available to their student athletes, branding training and media training, social media training, and things like that. And that becomes a recruiting tool. Come to Ole Miss, and you'll have your own counselor that will help you to monetize your personal brand or whatever it is. And that's not a bad thing in and of itself. It's like anything else. How is it applied? How is it rolled out? And that will have a lot to do with whether or not, I know one of your viewers said it was going to be an unmitigated disaster. I wouldn't take that bet at this point, because I think the jury is very much out on it. But there's a very good chance that viewer may come back a year from now and be able to say, I told you so. Right?
Yeah, it's a lot of uncertainty, which is part of the problem. The NCAA has their own things, not uniformity across the rules. Universities kind of doing whatever they want to, and kind of challenging the NCAA to do something about it, which they haven't necessarily been able to do or haven't cared to do. So yeah, that will be interesting to see. Do you have a favorite sport that you've worked with? I mean, what do you classify yourself as a fan, as most enjoyable for you, and then also as working in a working capacity?
Well, my lifelong passion has been the sport of lacrosse, playing, coaching, being a parent, but first and foremost a fan. So I will watch lacrosse at any level, anytime, any place, boys, girls, men's, women, indoor, outdoor, because personally it gave me so many opportunities in my life, and including going to college and where I met my now wife, and so it's and I've had the opportunity to work in sport a little bit, but I'm a baseball fan and a hockey fan at heart. Grew up in New York as a Mets and later a Yankees fan, and lifelong Islander fan. So those are my two sports. But you can't work in this sport and not have an appreciation, or work in this industry and not have an appreciation for the people who make things happen. Everything from the athletes to the front office people to the groundskeepers to everybody else in between.
Yeah, lacrosse is one of those sports that is not universally played throughout the U.S. And then with the Title IX, you got some schools have it. In Gainesville, the Gators have women's lacrosse, but not men's. My high school team didn't have a lacrosse team. I know there's big news. The PLL merged with the MLL.
Yep.
So hopefully this will be their first season, and maybe they'll see some growth there. My friend Brent says you must be from Nassau County.
Oh man, Brent, you're clairvoyant. Is it my Long Island accent?
I think it's something you just said.
Well, Islander fan, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Look, between lacrosse and Islanders fan, he probably was able to triangulate. If I say much more, he'll probably get down to the block I grew up on.
He's he said it was the Islanders. What do you feel about the Islanders move? I mean, they talk about the Nets moving too, right? And going from New Jersey to Brooklyn. And how does your fanhood go from moving, not like from St. Louis to LA, but like from New York to a different part of New York?
Well, as a crow flies, the Islanders will be playing about 7 to 8 miles from where they are playing now. And as much as I love the Nassau Coliseum, it is just a god-awful venue. They did a major renovation a few years ago, but it was just so much lipstick on a pig. And so the UBS Arena, from what I've seen, is going to be state-of-the-art. It's going to be amazing. So I think, it's interesting when the Islanders moved from the Coliseum to the Barclays Center, very few, none of the players moved, and they had very little crossover, or I shouldn't say very little. They didn't see the uptake on the Coliseum fans going over to Barclays Center. So I think you're going to get those dyed-in-the-wool Islander fans back in the barn next year when they're playing at UBS. And listen, I don't want to jinx it, but I think the Islanders do have a reasonable chance of lifting the cup for the first time in 35 years.
The Lightning might have something to say for it. They got hot goaltender, but we'll see. It should be interesting. I like to ask for Mount Rushmores, but I'm going to give you a different one. Okay. Who do you think are the 4 best companies that leverage sports marketing? The best at sports marketing?
It's anyone I'm working with at a particular time.
You can't play favorites. I get it.
No, that's a great question, and there's a lot of them. I think I think Visa, and in the interest of full disclosure, they were a client many years ago, but I think they really take the assets that they get from the sponsorships and create incredible engagement opportunities, not only for consumers, but for their member banks and all of their stakeholders. I think they do it particularly well.
I think you having insight into the operations is cause for you to understand why they are as good.
Yeah.
Not saying, hey, it's great because I work with them, but that does give you the insight for it.
Right. I think, Coca-Cola historically has
Yeah.
created such great engagement opportunities around their Olympic partnerships and their World Cup sponsorships. I think they've done a tremendous job historically through that. I think it's more of a again.
Preference too.
I'm sorry.
It could be personal preference, like who, just one that you like that's involved.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who else. I think Cricket Wireless is a company that does good things. They're not a big spender, relatively speaking, but the investments that they make allow them to really go deep with the properties that they sponsor. Probably most notably the WWE.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is a new one on the horizon, but I expect great things out of Amazon. Right? I think it's an incredibly bold move to spend naming rights dollars and then not even put your company name on the building.
I mean, everyone knows the climate. You're talking about climate
pledge arena, and they've made some strategic hires on that in that space. I think you're going to start to see over the next 6 months to a year some pretty big announcements. And I'm not talking about the Amazon Web Services side. I'm talking about the traditional Amazon side.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see, and I'm not working with them, so I'm not speaking out of school. But from everything I've heard, I think they're going to be making some big investments in some global properties, and so I expect some big things coming out of them.
Yeah. We'll let you out of here on the same question we let everyone out of the conversation with. You have 24 hours to spend. You can meet anyone you want and spend a day with them. They have to be living. You can't be related to them. Who you're going to pick and what are you guys doing? We're putting a list together, and I'm already working towards making some of this happen.
Just one person?
One person. Well, it could be. I guess it could be a band if it's like a music thing, but.
I would have to say, and do they need to be in the sports?
No, it could be anyone.
Sir Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney. And what would you guys be doing?
Well, I'd probably go over to Liverpool and do a walking tour with him to find out about sort of, how a kid from Liverpool became a cultural icon.
Yeah, my good friends are from Liverpool. They flew all the way over to the U.S. for my wedding, so we'll have to include Mike and Sarah if we do make this happen for you out in Liverpool. Great choice.
I would be happy to meet them.
Yeah, great choice. Really appreciate you coming on here. Great conversation. Be happy to continue it anytime. Check out Tim McGhee on LinkedIn. Send him recommendations for his nice gal, nice guy, nice gal. Check him out on Twitter. If you're a brand, a company, a league, and you're looking for some insight and consulting, Tim can help you with that. And anything else?
Matt, I just want to thank you, A, for this opportunity. I really enjoyed this conversation. And B, I love the positivity that you're putting out on LinkedIn on a regular basis. I think we need more of that in this world. So kudos to you. I just think it's phenomenal. So
yeah, I appreciate that. Your nice gal, nice guy stuff is inspiration. The people who are posting those jobs, that's inspiration. So it's really encouraged me to do my part, and I hope to inspire others to do it well. And let's all just keep paying it forward.
Great advice.
All right, we got one more episode on Friday of the Wolff Den. We're off tomorrow, but catch us again on Friday and have a great day. Thanks for joining.